Hello, my name is Daniel. Thank you for being here with me today. If you enjoy real, heartbreaking cheating stories from Reddit, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It really means a lot to me. This is a story that's been haunting me ever since I read it, because it's about the kind of betrayal that doesn't just break your heart, it leaves you wondering if love ever meant anything at all. The original poster, who I'll call Evan, is 23 years old and lives in a small coastal town outside Galveston, Texas. His girlfriend, Rachel, is 25. They've been together for 4 years. That kind of relationship usually comes with trust, familiarity, deep roots. But sometimes even the most stable-seeming connections can fall apart in a single drunken night. It all happened just a few days ago. Evan, Rachel, and some mutual friends went out to a local nightclub. Nothing fancy, nothing wild, just drinks, music, laughter. It wasn't supposed to be anything more than that. But about halfway through the night, things took a turn Evan never saw coming. Rachel had disappeared for a while, and when she finally reappeared outside the club, she wasn't alone. She was holding hands with a much older man Evan had never seen before. She walked right up to Evan and told him she was going to the bathroom with this stranger. Just like that. Her tone was casual, like it was no big deal. But Evan stood there stunned, frozen, helpless. 5 minutes later, they came back. But something had changed. Rachel wouldn't look at Evan. She ignored every attempt he made to talk to her. She stood next to the man. The two of them focused on their phones, exchanging numbers. She wouldn't even respond when Evan gently asked her to come home with him. Eventually, Evan gave up. Not angrily, just broken. He told her to stay if that's what she wanted, and he walked away, alone. When he got home, something inside him couldn't rest. He opened the location-sharing app they used and saw that Rachel was no longer near the club. She was now across town in a neighborhood neither of them knew, at an address that didn't belong to any of their friends or family. He would later find out it was that man's house. Rachel would claim she left right away, that nothing happened, that she couldn't remember much from the night, that the alcohol made everything blurry. She called Evan sobbing the next morning, begging him not to leave her. She said it was the worst mistake of her life and that she couldn't live without him. But when they met up the next day at a coffee shop, everything changed again. This time she didn't cry. This time she blamed him. She told Evan that it was his fault because he didn't try hard enough to stop her, that he should have pulled her away, that by letting her go with that man, he compromised their relationship, that somehow he had failed her. Evan couldn't believe what he was hearing. For a moment, he even wondered if maybe she was right. Maybe he should have done more. Maybe he should have made a scene. Maybe he did let her down. But then, through the fog of guilt and confusion, one final detail pierced through. She had also threatened to hang herself. That was the part Evan didn't know how to carry. He didn't know if he should tell her parents, if it was even his place. He didn't know what to do with the crushing fear that if he walked away, she might actually do it, and he'd never forgive himself. And yet he also didn't know how to stay. Because how do you stay with someone who betrayed you and then told you it was your fault? He posted the story online, desperate for clarity, and the responses flooded in. One commenter told him plainly this wasn't his fault, that Rachel was gaslighting him, that no matter how intoxicated she'd been, holding hands with a stranger and going to his home wasn't something innocent people did. Another said she was manipulating him, using guilt and threats of self-harm to twist the situation into something it wasn't, that he should walk away while he still could. But one reply stuck out to me the most. It simply said, "She made a choice, and now she's trying to make you carry it." There's more to this story, but for now, that's where Evan stood. Trapped in guilt, heartbreak, and fear, wondering if love meant protecting someone even when they were the one who hurt you the most. Evan always believed that love came with responsibility, especially when someone you cared about was in crisis. But now, that belief had become his prison. After everything that had happened, he still found himself haunted by Rachel's words, the tears, the trembling voice, the way she'd told him she couldn't go on without him, and worst of all, the quiet but heavy threat that, if he left, she might not survive it. She said it like a passing thought, but it had settled in Evan's chest like an anchor. He turned to strangers online, trying to make sense of what had happened. One comment stood out from the rest. She made a choice, and now she has to live with the consequences. But those consequences are the end of a relationship, not the end of her life. Another told her that Rachel needed help, and that if she truly was a danger to herself, someone close to her needed to know, not because it was Evan's responsibility to fix her, but because walking away didn't mean walking blind. Evan didn't know what the right move was. If it had been someone else in his shoes, watching the woman they love hold hands with another man, follow him into the bathroom, then vanish to his home, he knew what he'd tell them. Walk away. Run, even. Don't let guilt blur the truth. But when it was your own heartbreaking, everything felt less clear. Still, he made a decision. He met Rachel the day after she called crying. She said she was ready to change, ready to fight for them. She promised she'd start therapy and begged him not to give up. But Evan couldn't ignore the quiet, growing truth inside him. Something had broken. Maybe not permanently, but enough that he didn't recognize what they were anymore. He told her gently, but firmly, that it was over. That he had to choose himself, even if it shattered her. He drew the line she hadn't expected, and that he, deep down, never wanted to draw. Later that evening, Evan called Rachel's mother and told her about the suicide threat. Her reaction was shock, fear, and denial all at once. She insisted Rachel hadn't cheated, that she was just drunk, that she'd never do something like that. Evan didn't argue. He didn't remind her that Rachel had stood in front of him holding another man's hand, that she refused to come home, that her phone's location had led him to a stranger's house. He didn't say it, but part of him still wanted to believe it too. Maybe nothing happened. Maybe she had left a man's house right away. Maybe she just didn't remember. But none of that changed what he had seen or how alone he had felt in that moment. Rachel and her mother both blamed him for ending things, for not doing more, for not saving the relationship. But Evan knew that no matter how painful it was to walk away, staying would have cost him more than just his pride. It would have cost him his peace. There were voices telling him that maybe he should have done something, pulled her out of the bar, yelled, begged. But he had tried. He had stood outside that club and reached for her, and she had looked right through him. He hadn't always been the perfect partner. He knew that. There were moments when he hadn't shown up the way he should have. But what she did, that wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. And for the first time, Evan gave himself permission to say it was enough. "I feel heartbroken," he wrote. "I feel guilty. I feel like I should have done more. But I also know I tried." The comments rolled in, echoing what he was just beginning to believe. You did the right thing. She definitely cheated, even if she won't admit it. You can't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. And then it got worse. 2 nights later, Rachel showed up at his apartment. Evan had told her not to come, that he needed space, but she came anyway, shaking, eyes glassy, voice frantic. She said she had taken a bunch of pills, that she was going to hang herself, that this was his fault for walking away. Evan's roommate overheard everything. She saw Rachel's car peel out of the driveway, tires screeching into the night. Evan panicked. The next 2 hours were a blur, frantic phone calls, dead ends, a wild chase across their coastal town. By some miracle, they found her. She was still alive. They took her home. And Evan? He just stood there in the dark, feeling hollow. That night erased everything else. The betrayal, the fight, even the breakup. It was all drowned by the terror that she might die, and the unbearable weight that if she did, he would carry that forever. Rachel later told him she hadn't meant to involve his friends, that she was just overwhelmed. She started counseling soon after, but for Evan, the damage had already been done. They were still broken up, but now she was refusing to let him find a replacement tenant for their apartment. The lease was new, barely 2 months old, and she was using it to hold on. Evan had finally chosen himself, but somehow he wasn't still free. By the time Evan sat down to figure out what to do next, the weight of everything was finally starting to settle. He was no longer just heartbroken, he was stuck. Just a few weeks earlier, he and Rachel had signed a 12-month lease together in a quiet neighborhood outside Galveston. The place was supposed to be their fresh start. Hardwood floors, 2 bedrooms, a little balcony where Rachel had said she'd grow herbs in the spring. Now, Evan couldn't even step foot in the kitchen without being reminded of how everything had crumbled. After their final fight, the threats, the chase, the broken trust, Evan had told Rachel he needed to move out. Emotionally, he was done, but legally, financially, he was still tethered to her by paperwork and rent. She refused to let him list the room or find a replacement tenant. She wouldn't even talk about it. And part of him wondered if this was her way of clinging to him, keeping him stuck one way or another. "What am I supposed to do?" he wrote, exhausted and numb. People responded. A few kind souls pointed out that in situations like this, you can usually contact the leasing office and request to be removed from the lease for a small fee. It wouldn't be cheap, maybe half a month's rent, but it was possible. More than one commenter told him, "This is more common than you think. You're not the first person to get trapped in a lease after a breakup. Property managers deal with this every day. Get out now before it costs you even more." It was helpful advice, sure, but reading it just made Evan feel smaller, because while paperwork could be fixed, what it symbolized, the plan they'd made together, the life they were supposed to build, was gone, and he was still the one left picking up the pieces. He hadn't responded to Rachel in days. She'd texted a few times, mostly vague messages. "Hope you're okay. We need to talk about bills. I didn't mean to hurt you." But Evan couldn't bring himself to open a dialogue. Every word felt like reopening a wound that hadn't even started to scab over. Sometimes, at night, he'd walk by the apartment complex just to look at the building from the sidewalk. Their lights would be on. Sometimes he'd catch a glimpse of her through the kitchen window. Once, she was standing at the sink, her hair tied up, staring blankly at the wall. He didn't know if she saw him. He didn't stay long enough to find out. There was a time when he would have done anything to protect her. Now, he was just trying to protect himself. And yet, the guilt still clung to him like a second skin. He thought about the way she begged, the way she said she was sorry, the way she insisted nothing happened. Her mother's furious voice on the phone, accusing him of giving up too soon. The moments he almost believed them. But then he remembered standing outside that nightclub, her walking up to him with another man's hand in hers, saying she was going to the bathroom with him, like Evan wasn't even there, remembering the way she looked through him, not at him. That was the moment he started to disappear. That was the moment he lost her, not because of what happened afterward, but because of what she chose right then. So, what do you do when someone breaks your heart and then won't let you move on? Evan still didn't have the answer. But he knew one thing: staying wasn't saving either of them. Even though the love hadn't entirely disappeared, even though her pain was real, even though he didn't want to be cruel, it wasn't love if it required destroying yourself just to hold it together. And so he sat down with a pen and a copy of their lease agreement, and he finally made the call to the rental office. He didn't know what would come next, how long it would take, what the fallout would be, but it was the first time in weeks he'd done something for himself. For the first time, he chose freedom over fear, and that somehow felt sadder than anything else. Evan didn't sleep much in the weeks that followed. Even after the paperwork started moving, even after he stepped away from the apartment and Rachel's silence became the new norm, his mind kept circling back, not just to the betrayal, but to all the little things that came after. The moments no one talks about, the aftermath that lingers. There was no grand finale, no dramatic ending, just emptiness and noise. A hollow routine of waking up, trying to eat, trying to breathe without the weight of guilt clawing at his ribs. Rachel stayed quiet for a while. No more texts, no calls. The last thing she said to him, something about needing time, replayed in his head more than he wanted it to. But that silence was its own kind of message. He found himself obsessively scrolling through Reddit threads late at night, reading other people's heartbreak like it might somehow explain his own. There was one post in particular that hit harder than he expected. It wasn't even about cheating. It was a mother talking about how her daughter had cut her off after she kept trying to control how she folded her laundry. At first, Evan thought it was ridiculous. Laundry? That's what it came down to? But as he kept reading, he saw himself in the quiet moments of realization the mother described, not because he had done something similar, but because she too had reached a breaking point and realized she couldn't control the damage she had caused, and she couldn't undo it either. She wrote about how she'd once believed her actions were rooted in love, that micromanaging her kids' lives was her way of caring, that making them do things a certain way, her way, meant keeping them safe and prepared. But her daughter didn't see love in that control. She saw fear, pressure, pain. The mother said she didn't understand it at first. She argued, dismissed the feedback, claimed it wasn't that serious. But after her daughter walked out and refused to come home, something finally cracked open inside her. She booked therapy. She was diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive disorder, and in the quiet of the guest room, away from the rest of her family, she cried for hours, not because she had been caught, but because she was terrified she had already lost the people she loved most. Evan read that post 3 times in a row. What stuck with him wasn't the laundry, it was the way regret took root in silence. How denial didn't just keep you from changing, it made it harder for anyone to reach you before it was too late. The woman said she had spent years being the enforcer, the one who believed discipline and routine would earn her kids' respect. But in the end, all it earned her was distance. Her daughter only came back after she heard, genuinely heard, that her mom was trying to change. Not just promising to be better, but actually doing the work. And even then, the relationship was fragile. She said she still had a long way to go, that every day was a balancing act between letting go and holding on, and that all she wanted now was to grow old with her kids still speaking to her. Evan sat there for a long time after finishing the post. He didn't comment, didn't save it, but something in him shifted. Because even though his story was different, the thread of damage was the same. The line between love and control, between support and suffocation, between guilt and truth. He didn't know if Rachel was doing the same kind of reflection. Part of him hoped she was, that the counseling she started wasn't just a way to win him back, but to understand herself better. But another part of him didn't want to know. He had spent so long wondering what was going on inside her head. Now he just wanted quiet inside his own. It's strange, the things that help you heal. Sometimes it's a friend showing up. Sometimes it's a stranger's post in the middle of the night. Sometimes it's nothing more than knowing someone else messed up, admitted it, and lived to rebuild something from the ashes. Evan hadn't rebuilt anything yet, but for the first time he thought maybe he could. Maybe it was okay to not have closure from Rachel. Maybe all he needed was permission, from himself, to stop blaming his heart for breaking. Maybe heartbreak wasn't just about what was taken from you. Maybe it was about what you finally found when you were left alone. Rachel hadn't spoken to Evan in nearly 2 weeks, and for a while that silence had felt like progress. He'd filed the paperwork to remove himself from the lease, deleted her number from his phone, and even stopped checking her socials. For a moment, it seemed like life might finally begin to move forward. But as often happens with heartbreak, the silence didn't last. It started with a voicemail, then another, then a text, short and strange. "We need to talk about the dress." Evan almost didn't answer, but his curiosity got the better of him. The dress, he realized, was Rachel's way of shifting the conversation back into familiar territory, before the betrayal, before the breakdown, back when their biggest argument was over seating charts and save the dates. Still, he agreed to meet. He didn't know why. Closure, maybe? Or maybe just a need to understand how everything had become so distorted. They met at the same coffee shop where they'd once planned their future. The place felt colder now, quieter. Rachel looked different, more tired, more fragile. She smiled faintly, but Evan didn't return it. "I never meant to hurt you," she said, hands shaking around her cup. "I thought you should know that." Evan didn't respond, not at first. Then he asked, "Why did you go with him that night?" She looked down. "I don't know. I wasn't thinking. I was drunk. I felt lost. I wasn't trying to destroy us, I swear." But she had, whether she meant it to or not. Rachel talked for a while about therapy, about the flat, about everything that had unraveled, and eventually the conversation circled back to the dress, the wedding that would never happen, the life they almost built. Evan remembered how excited she had been when she first found it. A long ivory gown, delicate lace at the sleeves, a soft satin train. She had saved up months for it, picking up extra shifts at the bookstore, skipping dinners out. She called it her forever dress. That made what happened even harder to forgive. Rachel's mother had always been too involved, controlling, opinionated, overly familiar. But Evan never thought it would go that far. It started as a joke, at least that's how Rachel had framed it. Her mother, Jeanette, had asked to try on the dress, just for fun, she said. "I've always loved wedding gowns. They're like art, and I never got to wear anything this beautiful." Evan thought it was weird. Rachel thought it was flattering. But then Jeanette offered her $100 to try it on. That's when Evan drew the line. "It's not about the money," he told her. "That dress is sacred. It's not just fabric. It's a promise." Rachel agreed, at least she said she did. Until the day he came home early from work and found the apartment oddly quiet. Rachel's car was in the driveway. He stepped inside, heard movement down the hall, and then he saw his fiancée Austin standing outside their bedroom door, panicked, as if trying to block it. "What's going on?" Evan asked. "Nothing, just stayed out for a sec," he replied too quickly, fumbling with his phone. But Evan pushed past him and opened the door. And there she was, Jeanette, standing in the middle of the room in Rachel's wedding dress. His breath caught in his chest. It was surreal, something out of a nightmare. She looked at him, startled, then quickly turned away, trying to unzip the back. Evan didn't speak. He didn't scream. He just took out his phone and snapped a photo. He didn't plan to show anyone, not yet. But when he told them that Jeanette would need to replace the dress, everything exploded. She cried, claimed it was innocent, that no harm was done, that she just wanted to feel beautiful again. Austin took her side, yelled at Evan, said he was overreacting, said it was just a dress, said Jeanette was like family and Evan was treating her like a stranger. That night, Austin left, went to stay with his mother, didn't come back. And Evan sat in the dark, staring at the gown on its hanger, creased, stretched at the seams, no longer his. He couldn't wear it now, couldn't even look at it. It had been touched, claimed by someone else. It didn't belong to him anymore. Neither was the man he was going to marry. People online said what he already knew. This wasn't just a mother-in-law problem. It was a fiancé problem. Austin hadn't just let it happen. He helped make it happen. He covered it up. He defended it. Evan didn't care about the $3,000 anymore. He cared about what it meant, that no one had protected what was his, not even the person who was supposed to love him most. He realized then, you don't lose people all at once. You lose them in small betrayals, silent choices, and the things they let others do to you. And sometimes it starts with a dress. A few days after Evan caught Jeanette in the dress, Austin finally called. His voice was calmer, rehearsed. He said he wanted to end the tension, for everyone's sake. He offered to pay for the ruined gown out of his own pocket, not because he admitted fault, but because, in his words, it's just easier this way. But the offer came with conditions. He asked Evan to hand over his phone so Austin could personally delete the photo of Jeanette in the dress. He wanted Evan to swear there were no backups, no copies. Then he asked him to apologize to his mother, not for taking the picture, but for embarrassing her. Finally, Austin wanted Evan to remove himself from the family group chat and stay off social media for a month. Just to let things cool down, he said. Evan never responded. Not because he didn't want the conflict to end, but because somewhere in the middle of that call, he realized he wasn't the one who started the fire, and he wasn't going to spend the rest of his life putting it out. He didn't want Austin's money, he didn't want Austin's terms, he just wanted space, clarity, dignity. And he wasn't going to apologize for protecting the only thing he still had left, his peace. In today's world, emotional manipulation can be subtle but deeply damaging, especially when it comes from people we trust the most. Evan's story is a painful reminder that sometimes the betrayal isn't just in what someone does, but in what they ask you to accept afterward. If you find yourself being asked to compromise your boundaries just to keep the peace, take a step back. Healthy love doesn't demand silence, secrecy, or shame. It doesn't place conditions on your healing. Trust your gut. Document what feels wrong. And don't let anyone, not even a partner, make you feel guilty for standing up for your worth. It's okay to walk away. It's okay to choose yourself, even if it means breaking a promise you once hoped would last forever.